You don't have to ask around too much to discover that Patek Philippe's 5170 is considered one of, if not the best chronographs ever made. It's slick, it's slim, it's executed to perfection. But it also costs some £40,000. Just how close can you get for a quarter of the price? On the face of it, the Patek Philippe 5170 looks like a pretty simple watch. The dial is plain, the hands and markers unremarkable, the features on par with something 1/100th of the price, let alone a 10th. Associating a value of not just £10 but £40,000 seems like an exercise in delusion. It's an easy conclusion to make. But that's because Patek Philippe has never been a showy kind of watchmaker, except on the rare occasion like the fully engraved Grandmaster chime or the Henry Graves super complication. For the most part, it practices a reserved subtlety, its true value remaining elusive to anyone not in the know. Like a Mercedes S-Class, the experience is for the owner and not the observer, as we'll soon discover. We'll start with the dial, because it's the thing potential owners will be looking at the most. Everything there is what would be expected, but it's the way it's executed that lends Patek Philippe the reputation it has come to earn. The hands and markers are shaped and polished, by hand, to a mirror-like finish that appears so insignificant, especially at any distance, yet takes many hours of incredibly skilled labour to achieve. Even the print, layered on by hand, is impossibly flawless, retaining a crisp, bulbous, glossy finish that, for the designers and illustrators amongst you, has the properties of a vector where you'd expect a raster. Putting it simply, the quality doesn't diminish even at the extremes. Given a visual stress test, and the 5170 doesn't even break a sweat. And we're not done with the dial yet, because the last thing we'll mention is also the most impressive, and that's the offset subdials. Yes, that's right, the fact that the two smaller dials sit asymmetrically across from each other is a big deal, even if it seems less than arbitrary. What this tells us is that this watch secedes from the old ways, and indeed the ways of competitors like Vacheron Constantin and Breguet, and contains a chronograph movement made entirely in-house. For a long time, the chronograph movement was considered too complex and too costly to manufacture in-house, and many high-end watchmakers, Patek Philippe included, chose to outsource to, typically, a company like Lemania. But for Patek Philippe, not anymore. Those two offset subdials demonstrate the unique engineering that's gone into the caliber 29535 PS, a hand-wound masterpiece that tells the other half of the Patek Philippe story. From an engineering point of view, it's everything the brand set out to do when it established industry mainstays such as the combined winding crown and hand-setting mechanism. There's an instantaneous minute counter, an elaborate device that jumps the chronograph minutes on the minute, every minute. Even the teeth on the coupling wheel and the chronograph runner, the two wheels that mesh when the chronograph is activated, are given an asymmetric profile to reduce slack and wear. If the engineering is why you buy a Patek Philippe 5170, it's the finish of the caliber 29535 PS that makes you keep it. Each and every one of the 269 components is elaborately hand-finished, even the ones you can't see, making this multi-layered mechanism gleam like a jewel when it catches the light. That's what you get for £40,000. Now let's see what you can get for a quarter of that. Now, you may think that because Girard Perregaux is either a brand you've not heard of or know very little about, that it lacks the provenance of the much-praised Patek Philippe, but oddly, you'd be wrong. When Antoine Patek decided in 1839 that watchmaking just might be for him, some 6 years before Adrien Philippe was even on the scene, the business Constant Girard and Mary Perrigo would come to acquire and rename in 1856 had already been in operation for almost half a century, first established by a Mr. Jean-François Baut in 1791. So, no problems there. If you like your watchmakers old, they don't come much older than Girard Perregaux. But age isn't much without experience, and thankfully Girard Perregaux has that in spades. From the first high-frequency movement to the silicon blade constant force escapement, Girard Perregaux doesn't so much dip its toe into the field of bleeding-edge mechanical watchmaking as it does jump in and get thoroughly drenched. But enough about that, you get the point. What we're really interested in is this, the Girard Perregaux 1966 chronograph, and I'll have to admit that I've cheated a little bit here, because brand new, this is a £22,000 watch. If someone else has worn it, you can have it for less than half. It's a similar story for the Patek Philippe, losing a similar amount on its journey from the jeweller's window to its first owner. However, the dent that makes overall seems much smaller comparatively. Nevertheless, the Girard Perregaux is a quarter the price of the Patek Philippe for what is essentially the same watch. Except that it isn't. Not really. They may both share a twin subdial chronograph and a tachymeter scale just inside the bezel, as well as a precious metal case and a pair of flattened pushers flanking a dinky crown, but as an experience, they differ tremendously. For a start, the Girard Perregaux is 3mm bigger, and although that sounds like just, 3mm, it makes all the difference. The Girard Perregaux in isolation is a pleasingly proportioned watch, but worn immediately after the 5170, it comes across a little more ungainly. I mean, for the £30,000 difference, the Patek Philippe should be a better wear, and no surprises that it is. Within the case, the execution of the Girard Perregaux's dial is reassuringly well put together, trailing the 5170 by a small enough margin that only the highest magnification can reveal. Attractive blued hands offer a splash of contrast to the rose gold, although the yawning gap between the edge of the case and the date window hints at the disproportion between the movement and the rest of the watch. And it's within the movement that the Patek Philippe really stretches out a lead. The Girard Perregaux caliber GP030C0, an in-house, finely decorated rose gold roted engine is, like the rest of the timepiece, an impressive feat of watchmaking, until you look at the Patek Philippe. It's hard to imagine without seeing just how big the gulf between two small, hand-decorated objects can be, but let me tell you, it's big. I mean, there's the immediate impression of having a movement that fills the case, chronograph mechanism exposed instead of hidden by the autowork, but it goes deeper than that. The finish of the 29535 PS is richer, glossier, finer. Where things are polished, they're liquid smooth. Where they're brushed, it gives the impression of silk. On initial impression, you would wonder if you would have to be an expert to discern the difference, but in a few short minutes of examination, you soon realize you'd have to be blind not to. I'm not sure what's more impressive, the workmanship of the Patek Philippe or the proposition of the Girard Perregaux for just a quarter of the price. The side of the watch that looked up at you from your wrist displays a name you can be proud to wear in both cases, the canvas on which it's printed equally worthy of these two illustrious contributors to fine watchmaking. The back, however, is where the 5170 earns its crust, taking a no-expense-spared approach to demonstrating the capabilities of the finest horological craftspeople in the world. What do you think? Does that make it worth 4 times more? Let us know in the comments below. Discover more exceptional watches at Watchfinder. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If there are any other watches you'd like to see reviewed, please let us know in the comments below.